Welcome to Crime Most French, a fortnightly podcast covering intriguing cases carried out on French soil. Researched and narrated by Cedric and rudely interrupted by me, Melanie. We're the true crime podcast All Alliance. Crack open le vin and let the mayhem commence.
This is episode 70, the most prolific French serial killer, maybe.
So we've gone from last two episodes, priests, nobody died, to complete mass carnage.
Yes.
Okay.
In the 1990s, a serial killer is active in the Alsace region of France, so east.
Out east, yeah.
Yep. The part that's been French and German several times.
Hmm.
He might be responsible for 150 murders, making it the most prolific in France ever, and at least during the 20th century.
That seems an awful lot of people, and I've never heard of him.
I hadn't heard of him either.
Well, I haven't heard of a French serial killer who's killed 150 people. I don't even know who it is yet.
In 1993, a man, François Nicolot, turns up at a police station in Sausheim in Alsace. I'm going to butcher all these names because I don't really know how to pronounce Alsatian names.
But he's called Nicolo. That's not a terribly Alsatian name, is it?
No, it's probably Italian originally.
I would think so, yeah.
It's N-E-C-O-double-L-O.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes to the police station and he declares that he knows a murderer. He explains that he suspects his childhood friend, Yvan Keller, to be a serial burglar and murderer. He tells them his story and what he bases in his suspicions on.
Right.
He says that Keller has asked him to drive him at night in his own car to random places. He drops Keller off, then waits, often for several hours. Eventually Keller returns, gives him 500 or 1,000 francs, so we're talking 200 euros, or 200 and something dollars, and Niccolo drives him back home without asking questions. They've done that many times.
He's incredibly accommodating. Mind you, I guess if you're getting paid that much every
that's a
time.
good amount of money.
Yes.
2 or 3 times that and
yep.
You can pay your rent easily and buy food. So yeah, that's a good deal. If you're not too choosy.
And also you ain't paying tax on that either.
Oh no, of course not. Niccolo knows what's going on. Keller burgles houses.
Mm-hmm.
He's been doing that for many years. But Niccolo doesn't take part. He's just a driver. He says.
So he knows he's obviously up to no good because he comes back with a big bag that's got the word swag written on it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Recently, he noticed a neighbor of his mom's and reported to Keller that she would be a good target for a burglary because she's kind of rich. So Keller decided to do the usual thing. Niccolo drove him to about 1 kilometer from the house, dropped Keller off, then waited. Eventually, Keller came back, Niccolo drove him home, and pocketed a few hundred francs, as usual.
Yeah.
But this time, he learned that the old woman had been found dead the next day, and that her money had disappeared. He knows why the money has disappeared. He was slightly surprised that the woman was dead. He says he doesn't know any details, he's not sure, all he knows is what he's read in the newspapers, and he finds the coincidence quite big.
Yeah.
A while later, Keller contacts Niccolo again for another burglary. As usual, Niccolo drives him, Keller does his thing, and Niccolo gets paid. But once again, a few days later, he learns that the old woman was found dead close to where he had dropped off Keller. Of course, he doesn't necessarily know which house Keller goes to.
Yes, well, if it's a kilometre away, yeah.
Yeah, that was twice quite close.
Yeah.
So, big coincidence. And once it's the woman he had told Keller to go to. So now he has very, very serious doubts.
His strong suspicions that the guy's been up to no good.
He thinks that Keller is a burglar, that's a given. But also, now he thinks that he's a murderer. And that's why he decided to report him to the cops.
Uh-huh.
There's another reason. The other reason is that he's an informant for the cops. giving cops information for a while.
So basically, he's just taking money from left, right, and centre.
Yeah, for both sides.
He's clearly up to the height of shenanigans, but just up to a certain level.
Yes.
Where he's going to keep himself out of jail.
Yes. So the cops know him, obviously, because he's an informant, but they know he's very unreliable. They know that he has tendencies to embellish things, and as they have no other corroborating evidence of what Nicolo reports, they decide that it's just bullshit and they ignore him. No investigation is open in deaths that Nicolo reported were probably linked to Keller's activities.
So they weren't even going to bother looking into it?
Nope.
Seems a bit lazy.
Yep. One day we'll need to look into... there's been tribunals in France in the 80s and early 90s that were very, very keen on dropping cases. And that led to the creation of a court case branch in France this year or last year. This year, 2023, I think, they started.
Uh-huh.
Because judges that have taken over those tribunals have noticed a lot of problems from their previous colleagues who are now gone to retirement.
Yeah.
And it could well be that there are some in Alsace that are the same. So what they were doing is they were just getting cases and they said, that's going to be hard. Drawer. And that was the end of it. And it's in some cases, serial murderers have been killing people for 10, 20 years because of it.
Jesus.
So now they're cold cases. So it could be that this is something similar. We'll have to talk about that at some point.
All right.
We might not have resolution because, of course, these are cold cases and not solved.
Yeah.
But there's a few tribunals around the country that have been very bad.
Mm-hmm.
On the 12th of March, 1994, Germain Mang enters his mom's house. He finds Ernestine, 96, dead on her bed.
That sounds like a real old lady name.
Ernestine, yeah, totally. She's on her back, and the covers are very neatly pulled on top of her all the way to the chin.
Right.
He finds it strange because she had trouble moving because of problems with her hips. And he doesn't see how she could have perfectly stretched the covers on top of herself while she was in the bed.
Right.
It looks more like someone did it for her, but she lives alone. And he's her son, so he would know if somebody else was supposed to be in the house.
Uh-huh.
So he finds that very strange. So, of course, when there's a death that is assumed to be of old age, a doctor is called, usually the local doctor.
Yeah.
And
they died of old age.
Exactly. He looks at her and signs the death certificate and says, nah, she's just old. She died of a heart attack. That's normal.
So I'm taking it, if we're talking about it being connected with this burglar, then we're talking he's smothering. He's not doing anything hugely brutal.
At that point, nobody knows because that's a murder. That's just a death that just happens, and that's all that's known.
It's that kind of like poisoning or, as long as you're not like leaning on someone's neck, that you know, smothering is quite an easy way to kill someone.
On the 27th of April 1994, the months after, Augusta Vasmer, 77, is found dead in her bed. She's on her back, and the sheets are perfectly stretched on top of her all the way to the chin. Her daughter, Marie-Françoise Reuchlin, I'm guessing it's Reuchlin, finds it strange as well. Because again, nobody sleeps in the bed without disrupting the sheet.
No, not unless you're Sheldon Cooper from the Big
exactly.
Bang Theory.
Unless you're a fictional character, it doesn't happen.
Yes.
So, but there's no indication of a break-in. The doctor called on the scene, as usual, concludes that she died of a heart attack because she was old. But he thinks that maybe it was a great fright. He makes a note. She had a start and gave herself a heart attack. Yeah, he makes a note that maybe that's also possible. Her grandson, Nicolas Reuchlin, finds it very hard to believe that his grandmother died of a heart attack because she was in very good health for her age. And she wasn't that old, she was only 77. Also, he thinks that some money has disappeared. She was known to have a large sum of money in her house to pay for her funeral, like old people do. The same reason Morgan Freeman has gold earrings.
Really?
So, what?
Is that correct?
No, it is correct. You can look it up. Morgan Freeman has gold earrings, not in the films, but normally when he's in civilian life, so that if he's found dead somewhere, it pays for a funeral. I'm not joking, that is really true.
Wonder if that was because of the bucket list or not.
No idea, but that's true. You can look it up.
That's amusing.
So he finds it strange that money's gone because he knew, without necessarily having seen it because he's her grandson, he knew that that money was supposed to be there, but it seems to be gone.
That's the problem, isn't it? Old people do like to sit on their money. They don't
Yes.
like to put it in the bank.
Yes. But what's interesting is that while all that happens in Augusta's house, the daughter of Ernestine Monk, the one who died before, manages to get into Augusta's bedroom. She's sneaking in, and she's struck by the similarities in the way the two beds look.
Right.
So she's seen her mom's bed with her mom dead in it, and that woman is identical.
Has
So
a hospital corners or something.
Well, she tells the Roses that the way Augusta was found was exactly the same as the way Ernestine was found. The doctor agrees that it's very strange, and he refuses to sign the death certificate. Because now the doctor thinks, yes, okay. Because what you have to know is that these two women are essentially neighbors.
Right.
They live in the same street. And in fact, it's the third old woman dying in that street within a couple of months.
Wow.
And yes, it can happen. They were kind of old.
Yeah.
But that's never happened before.
And it's very common to die waking up.
Yes.
When your body tries to
It's
wake
just a
up, you have
coincidence.
it's just so much strain on your heart.
Yes.
It's how we all want to go, drifting off in our bed. But, it's very common.
Yes. But it's kind of suspicious that so many women died in the same street in that short time.
And tucked up in their bed.
And they look exactly the same in
like
their bed.
They're a small child.
Yes. So that is very, very strange.
Yeah.
Later on, Marie-Françoise notices that Augusta's bank card and key to the house have disappeared. Checking bank statements, she notices that the bank card has been used in Mulhouse, so that's the capital of the region, to get money out of an ATM. Unfortunately, at that time, ATMs didn't have cameras. So we don't have photos of that. But there's a witness who saw who was withdrawing the money at the ATM, and it was a thin man, about 1.70 meters tall, with light brown hair. Not a 77-year-old old woman.
Yeah, okay.
Also, she was already dead at the time.
That must have been a huge coincidence that he broke in and stole her ATM card and keys just when the old lady was dying.
Yes. After an autopsy is performed, because something's fishy, Augusta's death is ruled natural causes by asphyxia.
Natural causes by asphyxia?
Yes.
So how does that work?
I'm guessing natural causes is the way she died. Asphyxia is the cause, but it doesn't say if it's intentional or not.
I mean, you don't just asphyxiate yourself. Your body doesn't, unless you have an anaphylactic shock.
Yeah, well, it could happen for other reasons.
Okay.
But the death certificate doesn't go and say it's murder or it's accidental or anything.
Yes, so they're calling it natural causes still.
Yes.
Okay.
If the police had made the effort to connect the dots, they would have noticed that something fishy was going on in that town, because we know it's the same street.
I'd be interested to know if that doctor had a good look at that old lady's eyes. I bet she had hemorrhaging in her eyeballs.
Yes, totally. But the problem is because they had assumed that they were old and died of natural causes,
they just
they never paid attention.
Yeah.
Yes. Because Helen and Alice Müller is essentially Martin in Alsace.
Or Smith.
Or Smith, yep. Who are two elderly sisters living together. Alice is 88 and greatly limited in her movements. Helen is 82. They live in the same house, but one sleeps on the ground floor, one sleeps on the first floor. During the night of the 7th and to the 8th of March 1991, so we're still in the same town, we're 3 years earlier, at 4 a.m., Helen is awakened by a noise. She gets up and decides to investigate at 82. As she comes down, she's confronted by a burglar who runs out immediately. Helen finds Alice dead on her bed, on her back, her arms neatly against her, the sheets pulled up all the way to her chin. The doctor called to the scene declares the death a heart attack. As there is 600 francs under Alice's pillow, who knows why,
Wow.
and they haven't been taken, the police conclude that it's natural death and they don't investigate.
It was natural death, but it also just happens to be that there was a burglar.
Yeah.
For crying out loud.
It doesn't stop there. On the 21st of December 1991, Marie-Louise, an octogenarian, is found dead in her bed. The doctor who checked her body ruled natural death. Nothing to see here. No need for an inquiry. We're still in the same area. In January 92, Yvette, 76 years old, is found by the fire brigade and her great-nephew, Jean-Marie Bechler, dead on her bed. She's lying on her back, arms neatly along her body, with the sheets pulled all the way to her chin. See the pattern there.
Yeah.
We're still in the same area. We're talking a small number of villages, one next to the other.
And they all have an idiosyncratic way of sleeping.
And there's an awful lot of old ladies who are found dead in their bed over a period of 3 years, all neatly covered by their sheet, and nobody can explain how they died.
I guess it's easy to see a pattern afterwards, but
yes,
come
of course.
on.
Yes. But yes, they should really have noticed. The reason why the fire brigade was involved in that case, historically in France, they have been handling the emergency calls. So before there was an EU-wide number, 112, in France you called the 18, which is the fire brigade. And in fact, even today when you call 112, in most places like here, you're redirected to 18. So they still handle
I was going to say,
emergency calls.
we were in quite a bad car accident, and it was the...
Yeah, it was redirected to 18, yes.
Yeah, there was pompier, handsome young fireman moving me around. I loved it, whilst being in huge pain.
Yes. So anyway, the doctor that came to the scene decided that it was natural death. Jean-Marie, however, noticed a blood stain on the sheets around Yvette's hips. Jean-Marie knows that Yvette was very strict on her hygiene, and there was absolutely no way she would have gone to bed in a bed with stains on the sheets. To him, that blood stain proves that her death wasn't natural. He also notices that one of the shutters isn't closed properly, and that the locks on her front door are not locked. Yvette was always very careful to lock all the shutters, lock all the doors, before she went to bed. So to him, these out-of-the-ordinary things show that something has happened. But the police isn't interested, and they go with the doctor's conclusion, nothing to see here.
Lazy doctors and lazy policemen.
Yeah, they're not interested in solving crimes about old ladies, obviously. No. So that's why if the police had tried a bit harder to connect the dots, they would have thought that Nicolo's report of knowing a murderer and the way the crime scenes, the dead women were found after he said, I drove that guy to these places, should really have raised alarms.
Well, I mean, it is the cry wolf, but sometimes a bullshitter isn't necessarily bullshitting.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But they didn't care too much, so they were just old ladies, they didn't care, so that was it. Unfortunately, the deaths don't stop there, obviously. So on the 21st of January 1994, in a nearby town, Marie Westerholer, 79, is found dead in her bed, lying on her back. The doctor that came to the scene concludes natural death again. Delivers the death certificate. On the 12th of February 1995, that continues for a long time. Madeleine Lesec, 79, is found dead in her bed. She's lying on her back, a sheet neatly pulled on top of her. The doctor concludes that it was a heart attack and delivers the death certificate. Her children discover that 1,000 francs are missing from the house, but the police isn't interested again, so no inquiry. All those are taking place in neighboring villages, and in some cases in the village of the first 2 or 3 murders.
Yeah. This guy...
That's a lot of old women.
Yeah, this guy is essentially just robbing Harold Shipman.
Yes. Oh yeah, totally.
I mean, that's
exactly what he is.
Disgusting.
Yeah. And there are probably more, because these are the ones that we know about, but there's probably more of them that haven't been connected. So in 2000...
Jesus Christ.
Yes, The justice finally decides to have a look at Keller.
So basically, the guts of 10 years later.
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
Yeah. So an inquiry is opened in a series of burglaries, and Keller is suspected by the police. The investigation concludes on the 31st of March 2001, and on the 25th of April 2001, the case is closed with no action taken by the tribunal. They nearly had him, and they let him go.
Oh my God.
Finally, on the 24th of June 2003, Pierre Keller, Ivan Keller's brother, enters the police station to report that he suspects his brother is a burglar and a killer.
Right, okay, so we're now at family member, and we've upped the rung from just like a dodgy maid.
Yes, and one of the old cops that was there when Nicolo came in suddenly remembers, oh, there's a guy nearly 10 years ago who came and said exactly what you're telling us.
Oh my God.
So now someone is starting to connect the dots. Keller at the time is running a gardening and landscaping business. He seems fairly successful at it, and his customers are happy with his services. They even recommend him to each other. His neighbors also say that he's nice, polite, and helpful, good with animals, apparently, and a good neighbor overall.
Good with animals, not so good with old ladies, eh?
Yes. The police puts wiretaps on his phones because they have nothing about him. All they have is two people saying he's a murderer. That's it. So they can't really arrest him, and they don't want to risk him run. So they put his phone on wiretaps. They discover that Keller and his girlfriend, Séverine, in fact have a double life. By day, they run a gardening business, and everything looks normal. By the weekend, they live a life of luxury in expensive hotels and restaurants. They gamble huge amounts of money in casinos away from the town, and they bet on horses away from Alsace. They should not have that money.
No.
During the inquiry, the police discover also a different side to Keller. He's not just a good neighbor that is good with animals, as people have reported. When talking to his first wife, they learned that he was in fact violent and ruthless. He even forced her to prostitute herself because he needed more money.
Oh, he sounds like a prince.
Yeah. They also hear that his relationship with Séverine has a peculiar beginning. She was at the time living with a guy called Fabien, and Keller apparently went to their house one day with a gun, put it in Fabien's mouth, and say, "You give me your girlfriend."
Right.
And that's how she became his girlfriend.
Wow. That's a good foundation for a strong, healthy relationship.
Yeah, Stockholm Syndrome.
Mm.
Finally, they learn his past. In December 1982, when he was 22 years old, at Battenheim, Keller had attacked an antique shop owner, and he went away with a few items and paintings and stuff. He was arrested on the 22nd of December 1982 and sentenced to 10 years in prison. That was in 1984. He was freed on the 4th of August 1989 after 6.5 years.
Mm.
It's then that he moved to a new town
and
started his gardening business.
And that's when all the old ladies suddenly started dying in bed.
Probably, although the first one we know nearly for sure is 91, so 2 years later.
Mm.
But there could have been some between 89 and 91 we don't know about. So now the police is very, very interested in Keller because he looks like the typical murderer, and they have people saying he is a murderer, and there's a whole bunch of murders that haven't been solved.
So now there's an actual sheer volume of them that it would be worth their while to try and solve it.
So on the 20th of September 2006, 13 years after Nicolo reported him to the police, Keller and several members of his family are arrested. At first, Keller's questioning goes nowhere. He denies everything they tell him they know. However, they notice that he seems very impatient to get on with things and leave. So they decide to drag things on as long as they can.
Mm.
And they also tell him that some members of his family have confirmed what they already knew and what they're telling him.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, cops lie to you.
Of course they do.
But he doesn't know that. They call it bluffing, but it's lying.
Bluffing.
So Keller is surprised that his family is turning against him, but accepts what the cops tell him, and he confesses to a whole bunch of burglaries. The cops, as they don't really have much of proof at all, ask him to give them details that only the guy who was there would know.
Mm-hmm.
Things like, I don't know, what he did to a body, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, he refuses to talk because he kind of thinks, okay, I'm going to incriminate myself. Maybe I should be quiet.
Yeah, maybe you should be having a lawyer with you.
Yeah, but he has two conditions. If Severin is given kind of a protected witness status, and therefore immunity, and if once in prison, he'd be kept in isolation, away from everybody else, he maybe would agree to talk to them. So the cops say, yeah, of course. They're not taking any risk because they don't have the power to decide for a judge what is going to happen to him. So they agree to it.
Yeah, they're just going to say anything he wants.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever he wants, yeah, fine.
Sure.
So he starts talking again. He's very naive.
Mm.
He confirms that he's a burglar, yeah. He insists that Severin isn't involved. Maybe. He explains that his accomplices were only driving him around and waiting for him, like Niccolo did, but he wasn't the only one.
Does this guy not drive?
Apparently not.
Okay.
I don't know.
Bit weird.
No idea, yeah. Obviously no, because it would be so much easier to do it on your own.
Exactly.
So no, he must obviously not drive. He was always the only one breaking into the houses, and that confirms Niccolo's report from 93.
Mm-hmm.
He gives the Rosas details of his actions that match the cases that they have connected to him, tentatively. He also gives them details on many cases that they've never heard of. And they start to realize that Keller is in fact involved in many, many, many more burglaries that they even thought possible.
So these have been burglaries that possibly the old lady
Maybe
wasn't
didn't
known
die.
to have any money
Yeah.
in the house, and they
Possibly.
just assumed that she had died.
Yeah, or maybe she didn't die, or maybe it was further away, so it's the different police force that investigated.
True. Mm-hmm.
They had absolutely no clue he had been in so
they're
many houses.
literally gobsmacked.
Yeah. So they ask him to describe his MO, and he explains that in order to burgle a house properly,
Mm-hmm.
you need time and you need to be able to search the house for valuable stuff without making noise and without being disturbed.
Mm.
So when he started his career, he calls it a career. Between burglaries, he had the time to think, because what happened is the first few times he got caught.
Mm.
And he started to think about, really, is it the best way? Because one day he's going to find somebody who's going to do something against him.
Mm.
Because he's not a big guy. He's thin and 1.70 m, so he's quite short and thin.
Yeah.
So he could find an old retired dude, like an old farmer that's like twice his size. That could turn bad for him. So he thinks about that in between burglaries.
Mm.
So that's what he decided, first of all, to case the joints first. So he would only target houses after he had enough information to know exactly who lives in it, when and what they do, and what their habits are. So then he starts to prepare. Most likely, given that he fled without taking anything in one of the first cases we know about from 91, it's likely that it was one of the first ones. Because he said at the start he got caught. And that's one case where Alice came down, she caught him.
Yeah.
So most likely 1991 is either when he started or very soon after he started.
Mm.
But we know he was in jail until 89.
Yes.
So that matches. The fact that he was a gardener helped, most likely.
Well, yes,
because
most
he had good reasons to enter houses.
Yes.
He had good reasons to spend time around houses and see what was going on.
and most of the people who have a gardener are people who can no longer manage to garden themselves.
Yes, exactly.
So, old ladies.
And also we know that he was the gardener of some of the victims.
Mm. And if you've got a gardener also, you tend to have a bit more coin than the average.
Yeah.
They're not going to be poor.
Yeah, so for example, it was Alice and Helen's gardener,
Yeah.
the two old ladies.
Mm.
So over time, he decides to target houses where only old people live, especially if they're old women, especially if they live on their own. Many houses that look a bit run down, which you would think is counterintuitive, but he decided that it was because it meant that they didn't spend their money unnecessarily on maintaining the house.
Yes.
So they keep their money.
Yeah.
So that money must be somewhere.
Exactly.
And therefore he targets houses that are a bit run down.
He has got
Not
a
the
point.
best houses.
He has got a point.
Yeah, I guess so.
You don't splash your cash in France. Only
No.
vulgar people spend their money and buy flash cars and do flash things to their house.
Yes.
It's a faux pas here.
Yes. So over time, he starts liking to try to find a key for a side door or a back door so that he doesn't need to break in, because at first he was breaking in. But if he has to, he likes to be very careful so as to not leave any of the signs of him breaking in.
Mm.
So he was pretty bendy and svelte, so that was an advantage for him. For example, he would climb the front of houses along gutters and stuff.
Right.
And he would break in on the top floor, where the cops would never look. Because
right.
if you look at our house, to break in on the first floor, you could do it by climbing the gutter, but you'd have to be a monkey. So,
I think it would be probably quite easy to climb up onto our second floor.
I don't know.
First floor.
You have to climb the gutter. It's not that easy. But he could do it very easily. So that's why the cops never saw break-ins, because they did happen, but not where they thought it would happen. Yeah, so they never looked.
It's not an elbow through the kind of like back door.
Yeah, or the front window or
something.
something.
Yeah.
It's like the back window on the first floor.
Yes.
So they would never look there. So that's how he gets away with it for a very long time without anybody noticing burglaries.
No. Well, they're so bloody lazy anyway. Why would they notice?
Yes. Or sometimes he would go via basements. So old, where you put the coal, the old holes, which are very small in some houses. He would fit in there and go in that way. Again, the cops would never think that someone would do that.
Yeah, because he's wiry and quite small.
Exactly. So that's how he managed to keep the cops away for years.
Mm.
And to cover his activities once he's in the house, he avoids stealing valuables that are easily seen missing, because he thinks that the cops, and most likely the family, will notice that things are gone too quickly. He doesn't want to be involved in any way.
No. You don't want to be stealing the jewellery that's already been promised to X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, so he steals things from attics or basements. So stuff that's stored away that everybody forgot for years. Yeah. Nobody will notice that they're gone. So that's what he steals from. Yeah. So that's why in some cases, when there was money in the house, it was still there. Because he knew other people would know the money was there, so he didn't take it. Mm-hmm. He was quite clever. Yeah. So he would go to the basement and take, I don't know, an old painting, or
it's not the big family heirloom over the fireplace that he's stealing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what he was doing. And to be sure that the old owners don't wake up at the wrong time, he did what he called put them to sleep. So he made them sleep.
Oh, he wasn't murdering them.
Well, when the cops ask, what do you mean by making them sleep? He explains that he put a cloth or a towel on his victim's mouth and then pinched their nose.
And smothered them.
Sometimes he uses a pillow. And he says that when he notices that the victim stops fighting, he normally lets them breathe again and starts again.
Holy crap.
Yes. Sometimes he had to do it several times.
Yeah.
But the reason why he was doing that is to not leave any marks.
Right.
Because they weren't fighting back, and they weren't actually dying very quickly. They were dying slowly. So it could be that it didn't leave that many marks, including bloodshot ties.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not a doctor. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah,
but
no, that makes sense.
That was his strategy. Yeah. So he would make them die slowly by making them suffocate.
Slowly depriving the body
of
oxygen rather than doing it in one quick blow. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. So that was his MO.
Yeah. Cruel.
Yes. Oh, a total psychopath.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Incredibly cruel.
Yeah. But that matches what the cops have noticed. Once they're asleep, he puts the arms against their body and then puts the sheets on top of them, all the way up to the chin. And he makes the bed again around them to pretend that they died very peacefully in their sleep so that nobody looks very closely. So that was on purpose that he was doing the sheet on top of them, because he thought that if it was perfectly made, it meant that they just fell asleep and died. And that kind of worked, because nobody looked at it very closely, except some members of the family who thought, there's no way you can sleep that way.
No.
But most of the cops and the doctors
didn't think twice.
They just Well, yeah, they didn't move, they didn't fight. Yeah, they died naturally. So that totally worked. When the cops ask Keller how many people he put to sleep, he says he doesn't know. When they insist, at least for a rough number, he says 150.
Holy crap.
And they're totally astounded because they were expecting maybe 10, maybe 15, a huge number, not 150. He can't tell them much more because he just doesn't remember. That's just too many, so many over so many years. But he says if they bring him a map, he can show them the towns where he's been over time and they can have a look.
Mm-hmm.
So they bring him a map and he shows lots of places in France and in Germany as well.
Oh, it helps splitting it over two countries.
Just 3, in fact, in Switzerland as well.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
So the whole area, he's killed people and
Of
nobody
course.
knows. In France, they link him to 23 murders, but they think it's about 40.
Right.
The rest is Germany and Switzerland. So probably about the same number.
Wow.
It could be 40 in every country.
That
Something
guy
like that.
is... just the whole fact he's distancing himself from what he's done by saying...
He calls them,
can't even say,
making them sleep.
oh yeah, I murdered 150 old wifeys.
Yeah.
Oh no, I helped put the old dears to sleep.
Yes. So he's indicted for 5 murders.
Indicted
For 5
yes,
murders. There are 8 more that are very, very likely also by him, and there's kind of some proof for it. But the statutes of limitation have run out.
Sorry? There's a statute of limitations on murder?
Yes. I think in France until the 90s at some point it was 25 years or 20 years. 20 years or 25 years, I can't remember. In Germany, there hasn't been. Rape and murder have never had any statute of limitation.
God.
But in France, murder, I think it was 20 or 25 years. I would have to check. So some of them, because they waited until 2006 at that point, some of them are already too old. So they don't even look into them. But they think that maybe he was involved in those. On the 22nd of September 2006, in his cell in the basement in the Mulhouse tribunal, he hangs himself with his shoelaces. And that's it. That's the end of it. 23 murders have been attributed to him with a good level of certainty. But they haven't been fully investigated. They haven't been tried.
Why is it these utter scumbags always commit suicide and they always get away with it? Yeah. They always get away with it.
Yeah, and we won't know much more because now that he's dead, there's no reason to investigate or do anything. Because if you know the murderer is dead, you don't investigate the murder. So that's about it, really. There are suspicions that his family, like his brother,
they all knew.
Yeah, and his first wife knew and possibly were involved as well. Maybe even some other members of his family. The cops don't think that he could have acted for so long, killed 150 people strictly on his own, without anybody's help. But he's dead.
He didn't kill a whole 150 at once.
No.
I'll tell you how it's easy to bloody kill 150 old ladies, because you lot all don't do your job.
Yes, but also you need to sell what you steal from them, so you need to have somebody to resell. It takes some organization, and I think so many times in such a short time, it's difficult to do it strictly on your own. So they think that he has help from his family, but it's not going to be investigated.
Presumably nothing happened to the poor girlfriend, did it?
No, not as far as I know.
Okay.
She was even compensated. What was it for? I think she was arrested and put in jail temporarily when an inquiry was going on, and she was compensated for that. I can't remember. Not a huge amount of money, but some money. Yeah. And that really pissed off some of the families because there's no investigation in the murders. They weren't compensated, but that woman who most likely was involved with the murderer was compensated. So that really angered some of the families.
Yeah. Well,
because
I'm
there
not
is
surprised.
a compensation pot for victims of crime in France.
Yeah.
So if your members of your family are murdered, for example, you normally get compensated, but it takes years and years and years. Whereas for Severin, it was a matter of months she got compensated, and that really pissed them off.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
But that's it. As of 2006, there's no more, and most likely will never be more.
Well, I normally say something amusing and pithy at the end of our podcasts, but to be honest with you, I'm so annoyed at the police. Just public service announcement this week. If you've got old people, for the love of Jesus, check who the hell's coming into their house and doing stuff for them. Do that for me so I don't have to sit through stories like this.